Utzimanu ba'asot
b'divrei
Torah.
Torah. Okay. Well, it's good to see all of you. And other than the bad news that I got from Leslie this morning that she tested positive yesterday, I was about to say, with all of the chaos that is going on in the world, with the hearings, with the climate change, with Ukraine, with Israel, with anti Semitism, and of course, with COVID, we are so lucky to be here today. And so I thought that we might also add Birkat HaGomel, and I'd love for somebody to explain what that is.
Well, I'm not quite certain, but I think it's a prayer that you say after a journey or after being luckily not involved in something that could have happened at that moment, maybe an accident. But surely after you've traveled somewhere and after you've returned home safe and sound, besides the COVID that almost everybody I know came off a plane with, and I'm serious, all my friends that went to wherever they went, they came off the plane, and a couple of days later they got COVID. So what you do is you even give a prayer if you got COVID, because life could be worse, and you're grateful for where you are, wherever you are, when you're safe and sound.
Oh, you summed that up so perfectly. I could not have done it better myself. So it's a prayer for escaping danger of any sort. And there are times that we've escaped things that we don't even know about. So I don't think it ever hurts to say this prayer. And I will say a few words at a time and have you repeat it after me. Baruch atah Adonai.
Baruch atah Adonai.
Eloheinu melech haolam.
Eloheinu melech haolam.
Hagomel l'chayavim tovot.
Gomel l'chayavim tovot.
Shegmalani kol tov.
Shegmalani kol tov.
Excellent. And we all say amen to that.
Amen.
Amen.
Very nice to see you. Or to see part of you. All right. So today's Torah portion, if you haven't had a chance to read it, is called Pincus. And it is, if you want to follow in the book, it is Numbers chapter 25, verses 10 to chapter 30, verse 1. And if you had to rename this portion, any suggestions as to what you would call it?
You say 30?
Wait a minute. I see in the Lisa is saying, could I please speak louder? I'll be happy to do that. And I just wanted to tell Hannah that the recording is paused, and I didn't know if she wanted to. I think I'm going to do it. Okay. So we're back.
I just want to hear you.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. Or it's actually afternoon since it's after 12. But any suggestions as to what we could call this besides Pincus?
Justified homicide? Question mark.
Okay. Okay, that's one possibility.
3 question marks.
How about the question that's being asked every single chapter? Are we there yet? And then another, because this is the first real stride that's made in women's rights.
Oh, it's Tzlachad.
So we might want to call this girl power.
Right. Or Tzlachad's daughters.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about this book of Numbers, which actually can be divided into two parts. And the first part is different from the second part because in this, the children of Israel are all receptive to God's will. They're kind of passive and they're just kind of like the vessel. They're receiving everything. They receive the Torah. They receive manna. They receive water to keep them alive. They are led by divine will. It's not about their relationship with God, but it's about Moses's relationship with God. And now all of a sudden, things are about to change. We're going to have a nation of individuals who will inherit the land, and they have to find their own way to connect with God. They're about to become partners with God, but they have to make the first move. So think about human initiative, about taking initiative, and that things all of a sudden are going to depend on us. So enter Pincus, because nobody takes life into their own hands more than Pincus. We are in the 40th year of the Exodus from Egypt, and in the end of Balak, the last week's Torah portion, we learn that the Moabite women had been enticing the Israelite men with the idea of getting them to become idol worshippers, and they're doing this through seduction. So enter Pincus, who catches two of them in, and forgive my pronunciation, I've never said this out loud, only read it, in flagrante delicto. An Israelite man named Zimri and a Moabite woman named Cosby, with the intention of having sex in a tent, and Pincus stabs them both with a single sword. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch agrees with Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, who says that if he had not killed them at this very moment, that while they were in the act, it would have been over. But he was doing something that would stop the plague that had killed 24,000 people. And Pincus, of course, does something that elevates himself, because you would think, since he was Aaron's grandson, that he would have been in line to become Kohen Gadol, and that is not the case. But he elevates himself and his future generations to the priesthood forever. Okay, so does anybody know why Pincus did not automatically inherit the priesthood?
But his father was still alive.
His father was still alive, but why was he not in line to become a priest? The thing that's very interesting there is he wasn't born at the time that his father became a priest. And because of that, he was not in line to inherit this. So there is something about Pincus that he kind of changes what's going to happen in the future. And there's even, I'm sorry? Oh, there's even a midrash that turns him into the prophet Elijah. So does anybody know of any connection between Pincus and Elijah? Okay, well, when somebody want to speak up?
Elijah was against intermarriage. Oh, no, whatever, wrong.
Is that Susan? Susan, I see your name, but I don't see you. Welcome.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I can only guess that perhaps they both felt very strongly against injustice, which Pinchas considered that a major public injustice. They're having sex publicly, Zimri and the Midianite woman. And Elijah confronted King Ahab and said to him, did you murder and also inherit? In other words, King Ahab and Jezebel were both huge examples of evil in Elijah's eyes. So perhaps they both felt that they had to speak up so strong.
Okay, well, that is just a fantastic answer. When I teach B'nai Mitzvah kids, I always tell them that the reason you're doing something from the Torah and something from the Haftorah, and they always think Haftorah is really half the Torah, which of course we know it isn't, is I said there's always a connection between the story in the Haftorah and something that has happened in this Torah portion. So anyone who has a book, if you want to scroll ahead, I don't know exactly what page the end of the chapter is, but you can see the Haftarah portion that follows this is Elijah. So not only does he get the priesthood for his family going forward, but he also gets to be with Jews for all eternity, visiting our homes on Passover and getting a sip of wine at each place, and that's not so awful. In the commentary to Numbers, it says that Rabbi Moshe ben Chaim Alshek, who lived in the 16th century in Turkey, suggests that maybe Pincus was not that ethically motivated in stabbing them and in defending the ethics of the Torah. Instead, he just wanted to prove himself worthy of the priesthood. He realized that because he's not in line to inherit it, he has to do something that he will risk his life in order to attract Moses' attention and secure the priesthood for himself and for future generations. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch comes to a totally different conclusion. He says Zimri was not an ordinary Israelite. He was a prince who should have set an example. And we like to think that our leaders would set examples. His blatant act with the prohibition in place forbidding sex with an idol worshiper of another faith debased the Jewish people. He said someone was needed to restore the people's faith in God. That's why God rewarded him with a covenant of peace and the priesthood for him and for his descendants. Pincus was not considered a Kohen because he was a Levite, but this act elevated him. He's singled out to enter the priesthood, not just as a descendant, but based on his own action, which I think is sometimes better. This is the dawning of the era of individuals characterized by actions. The gleanings in the Plaut Chumash, if you have that one, points out that Pincus took on the responsibility to act when neither Moses nor Aaron nor any of the 70 elders did. And then this book of Bamidbar, which is loosely translated as Numbers, when it literally means what, you must all know the answer to Bamidbar.
The desert, the wilderness.
In the desert, and instead we always translate it as Numbers. So this is not the first time that there's going to be a census, because it makes sense that if the book is called Numbers, that there is lots of counting. So the interesting thing about this census is that it is a totally different generation of people who are counted, with one exception, one outstanding exception. And I'm not talking about one individual, because there were several individuals who went forth to the land, to the promised land. But anybody have any thoughts on what this might have been? What category this might have been? Well, none of the men were allowed to go in except for, in the next generation, what about Joshua?
Caleb.
Okay, but the thing is, the women were spared this, I don't know if you would call it a curse or a decision by God, that because the Israelite slaves had been so challenging and so unwilling to really come forward and lose their slave mentality, that they were not going to enter the promised land. The big exception, of course, were their wives. Some of the wives who were fortunate enough to live into their old age were allowed to go in. Think about the story of the golden calf.
What
Who
about
wants
it?
to quickly summarize that? Lisa, I think your mute button's on.
I actually had a question or comment about something you just said a minute ago.
Yes.
So when you were talking about the different interpretations of the rabbis about Pincus killing who he killed, I can't remember who it was. He killed somebody because they were having
Zimri
sex
and Cosby.
with the wrong person. So it struck me as interesting or odd that one of the rabbis came to the conclusion that it was okay for Pincus to kill because somebody had to remind the Israelites, as you said, about faith in God or the power of God or the original rules that were set. And so I get that, but it's interesting that these rabbis felt that committing a murder was an okay way to do this.
That's an excellent point. I really do agree with you. I don't agree with all the commentators, but
I don't know if I agree or not. I don't know enough to agree or disagree. I don't have enough background knowledge. I just think it's interesting that I guess this is an esteemed rabbi would say it's okay to kill so that we can remind everybody about the power of God. That's pretty, out there.
I agree with that. The only thing that I might throw out is when we think of how the numbers of the Jewish population worldwide is declining, how the rate of intermarriage is increasing in record numbers.
Right. But killing is the final word.
It is, but the thing that they were trying to avoid was to have the Jews become idol worshipers, because then they would have gone away in droves. And the fact that the men were being tempted sexually was a big incentive for them. Susan?
Yes, they said that 24,000 were killed in the plague.
Exactly.
So a murder of one person who was cavorting with the Moabite or woman. Pincus stopped the plague that had killed 24,000 people. So, if you murder a Nazi guard to save the people in the concentration camp or something, it's one against 24,000.
That's a very, very good point that you brought up.
Wait, by killing this person, that stopped the plague?
That stopped the plague.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
People had been killed from this plague.
Okay, I didn't know that fact. So thank you.
If I forgot to mention it, I do apologize.
No, I probably didn't hear you, so it's okay.
Okay. All right. So I was asking if there's somebody who could very quickly tell the story of how did the golden calf come about? What did they have to do to fabricate the calf?
Gold earrings and
gold earrings
ornaments.
And the interesting thing was men wore jewelry then as often as women. And there is a midrash that says, the women. I'm sorry, Miriam, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just going to say what Susan said. They had to collect all the ornaments from everyone that was there in order to make the gold for the calf.
Yes, but there is a midrash that says the women would not give up their jewelry.
Oh, really?
Give up their earrings.
See,
So if
that I love it.
If that's the truth, then you can see why they might have been spared and be able to actually get to the promised land. Okay, and I don't think I mentioned Caleb when I said who else was spared. It was Caleb.
Yeah, Caleb and Yefuneh, right?
Okay, so the numbers in this census that's about to take place are astronomical. And Bernd, I know you can explain why the numbers in the Torah do not seem correct by today's standards. If I just start off by telling you 43,000 eligible soldiers were counted from Reuven alone.
600,000, yeah. Well, there's an interpretation that the word in Hebrew elef, which is used as 1,000, actually means a battalion in the military, and so what we really have is 600 battalions rather than 600,000.
Okay, well, the numbers in what I read recently didn't seem accurate by those standards, but your answer was perfect. I knew you would know the answer to that. Okay, so the 43,000, sorry?
They didn't have computers, they used their fingers.
It's hard to get up to 43,000. Okay, so the 43,000 from Reuben were supposedly actually only 730 soldiers. Shimon, 22,000. Miriam, did you want to say something?
No, dear, I didn't.
Okay. Shimon, 22,000 was really just 200. God of 40,000 was really just 500. And then this next one makes absolutely no sense. Yehuda with 76,000 men counted was really also 500. Yissaschar 300, Zebulun 50. The numbers go on. And of course, the Levites were not counted because they did not serve in the army, but they were paid for their service. So there were approximately, even though it says 601,000 soldiers were counted, it was actually approximately 5,500. So the land is about to be divided into parcels, and everybody would get a parcel according to the size of their tribe. And then something happens that women come in and save the day. Anyone want to tell us what happens now?
Well,
Daughters of Zelophehad. Oh, Berend, you can go ahead.
well, it's 5 sisters. You can't go up against those. And they didn't. No.
Okay, so the 5 daughters of, it's spelled out in English, I think, Zelophehad, but in Hebrew it's Slafchad. He had 5 daughters, no sons. They came before Moses for their share. They stated that their father was not part of Korach's rebellion. And they asked Moses what to do. So Moses went to God. Lisa, did you want to ask a question? I see your hand is up.
No, sorry.
That's
No.
okay.
No.
All right. And they asked God what to do, and Moses is told by God, this is what you have to do. You have to give them their fair share. So this is the first time that women are actually, in addition to not getting short shrift, they're getting something equal to what men are getting. There was one stipulation with this, because a woman's property would go to her husband if she married out of the tribe. So there was a restriction placed on these 5 sisters that they had to stay with that tribe and had to marry men from that tribe. Some people say that that the daughters were not just being selfish, but they were motivated for their love of Israel and their powerful wish that their father's name not disappear. And that to me is very touching. I took as my middle name my late son's last name because I only have a daughter, and her name got changed when she was married. So I understood this, and this touched me very, very much. The sages saw several examples where women's actions excelled those of men in the wilderness, particularly staving off God's wrath. There's a midrash that says for the 40 years that they were in the wilderness, men tore down the fences and the women repaired them. That they were finally getting rewarded for doing what they had done in Egypt, which is naming their children with Jewish names and continuing to keep up the traditions. So if you think of a lot of marriages, you know that the women are the ones who keep the Jewish tradition alive in the family. Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, who founded the Reconstructionist Judaism, he was the first one who championed women's rights by making his daughter the very first bat mitzvah in New York in 1922, 100 years ago. He saw the daughters of Tzlachad as an example of Jewish civilization's flexibility as well as its willingness to put the community in the forefront. But the struggle for women's rights is a terrible but accurate picture how traditional and unwilling our American societies become. There's been an ongoing gender gap in pay. I think the difference is still 20%. For the same job done by a woman, she gets paid 20% less. And leave aside the ERA and most recently the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it makes it even more remarkable that these 5 daughters living in the ancient male-dominated Middle East asked for permission to inherit their father's land. According to Rabbi Stephen Carr Rubin, who is the Rabbi Emeritus at Kehillat Israel in the Palisades, he says how blessed we are that the Torah puts its statement of gender equality in the mouth of God by declaring that the daughter's plea is just. So this is kind of a very special and different Torah portion. So before I move on, I could not continue without mentioning the namesake of this Torah portion. Oh, Bernd, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I want to emphasize that what this is all about is the inheritance of the land. You mentioned property, and I think that's a little different. What these women had was a piece of land because the tribes had to have land, and if they lost part of the land, it went to another tribe, and that would have been an injustice, meaning in terms of the tribes. And so it wasn't quite an equality issue as it is now. It was an issue of somebody had to hold the land for the next generation in that tribe or in that family. That's what God decided.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. Okay, I mentioned a namesake. There is a commentator who, they call him a contemporary commentator, but he actually died, I'm thinking maybe in the late 80s. He died young. He was in his 50s, and his name was Pincus Pelly. So that's why I wanted to mention him today. He sees all the pleadings not as a personal claim, but rather as an outcry of all women against discrimination and second-class citizenship. And I thought that was phrased so beautifully. Susan.
Yes. So I have another thing. It always seems to me, I get it for the women's position, but it's also a masterful instance of compromise, which I think is sorely lacking, unfortunately, in our society, in our rule makers, because the other tribes had a just point. They said if they marry, what Bernd brought up, if they marry outside the tribe, then this tribe, our tribe, loses land. They had a justification. So what's to be done? And I think they solved it masterfully. That the father's name gets to continue as long as the women marry within their tribe. That's called
That is a great point. Thank you. Lisa.
Yes, hi, I have a question. So if this was such a revolutionary moment where, women were standing up for what they thought they should be inheriting, has this Torah portion been used, in Judaism to help women advance? Or what do the Orthodox think of this moment? I mean, was this just a random moment, or does this kind of thing appear throughout the Torah where women are doing
Excellent question, and I'm going to have to defer to anyone who can answer that.
Well, I think this is brought up a lot. It's no secret, the daughters, Rabin's daughter was named Noah after one of the daughters of Zolo, I believe, if I remember correctly. So they are heroines. And this is a major example of in the Torah, and it's not discounted or disregarded. I've heard it brought up a lot.
But I wonder if it's brought up in terms of when people have real problems out now in the 21st century, and especially, the Orthodox, because don't the Orthodox do everything based on religious law, and instead of going to a lawyer, they go to a series of rabbis. And I'm just wondering how it plays out.
This plays out for them too. This is religious law, and it is women's rights there. I think the Orthodox, I think we have to give them credit.
I'm ignorant. That's why I'm asking.
I would hardly say that.
Well, I really don't know how it all works. I just wonder, knowing how it seems like, anyway, from the outside, that it's such a male-dominated kind of situation. I just wondered how it plays out in real life, today.
Miriam, your mute is on.
I still am so enormously disturbed by the Supreme Court injustices concerning abortion. When I hear it, I can hardly relax. I almost need not to engage in it. But I did take the liberty, since I have Orthodox rabbi friends, close ones, conservative and reform. I did ask them what their feelings were about abortion. And they stand absolutely with all the rabbis of Judaism, whatever so-called part you want to belong to, that anything that endangers a potential mother's health, that the emotional danger is as important as the physical danger, even though they can't prove it. Physically, you can say if a woman chooses to be pregnant, she is putting herself in this kind of physical danger, and everyone can understand that. But the emotional danger is as valid. And this is what all my Orthodox rabbi friends said. So that these injustices of the Supreme Court are not only anti-woman, anti-woman's integrity and personal psyche, but they are anti-religion because because of their religion, are telling me as a Jewish woman that I must do what their religion tells them. Therefore, this country of the United States, with all its flaws, nevertheless being one of the best, if not perhaps next to Israel, the best country, has total freedom of worship. Anybody in this country, unlike the Arab Middle East countries, anybody can worship any religion they wish. Therefore, the sin against these injustices is not just they are bringing women back to a hideous place again. They are absolutely anti-freedom of religion. And I think all the rabbis together should sue them, and I'll be very happy to sue them along with anybody else. So that
I think Bernd wanted to speak next. Thank you.
yes.
Bernd, go ahead.
Nope.
Yes.
I read it, and it's certainly, as far as is known in the Jewish faith religion, that
I'm having a hard time hearing you. I know your mute is off, but yes, please come a little closer.
the Jewish religion, all the way to Orthodox, a fetus is not considered a person, so that abortion is not killing, just like, let's say, the Catholics think. And that's, the rabbis say that too, so that as far as a Jewish woman is concerned, if she can get an abortion, she's not committing a crime, this ruling. But what we do have, and that's the sad part, is the Supreme Court now has, in a way, abolished the separation of church and state. And that, to me, is the worst thing they could do. That changes the United States, in my opinion, completely.
Thank you. Anybody have any other comments? Merle?
Well, I had it on, excuse me, I had it on I saw it on Facebook or one of those that a rabbi said, when you take your last breath, then you're not alive, or I can't, and when you take your first breath, you're alive, you're living. I'm not saying it right, I'm sorry. And he said that's the Jewish way of belief, but the Christian belief is different, or I don't know how he said it. Don't have it with me. And then he said, and that's okay, but that's then not a political thing. It should be a religious thing. He said it, and I'm saying it all crappy. I'm sorry.
I think you did a good job.
Thank you.
You did a good job. I think that if I can say something, Rabbi Leader spoke a couple of weeks ago and said that the word for breath and soul is the same word in Hebrew, which is Shema, if I remember correctly.
Neshama.
Yes,
Neshama.
thank you. And he said that life in Judaism, the belief is when you take that first breath, so the baby comes through the birth canal and the womb, and when they cry in that first breath, you have to have body and soul to be considered life in a human being. So when they take that cry in that first breath, then they're considered a person, a human being. And and we get back to, I think, separation of church and state. We don't want our religion to interfere with the government or anyone else's. And I don't want to comment on the people that are seated on the Supreme Court, but it may be interfering.
What I just wanted to say is no matter how you feel about this situation, which side of the fence you're on, what your religion is, what your morals tell you is what's right and what's wrong, how can anyone with 1 ounce of compassion not say that a 10-year-old girl who is raped can't have an abortion? It just blows my mind away.
Not only that, okay, an abortion, if a mother's life is in danger, she's hurting. Her death will, if she dies, and then her death affects so many, her children, her uncles, her aunts, her brothers, her sisters. So, I mean, that's another reason why a woman's life is, to me, more important than, the fetus.
Right.
I mean, that's just the way I feel. It affects too many other people.
I'm stymied by the fact that rape and incest would not have been two exceptions, that everybody with 1 ounce of human kindness would say, this is not right. We cannot let something like this continue. Okay, but that's it.
Can the rabbis sue for their religion as being is the Supreme Court? Can they
I
go
don't
and
think
sue
so.
No.
I
Or
don't.
any other
Anybody know if I'm right or wrong? But I don't think so. Really, I think it's just like you can't fight City Hall. I don't think you can fight the Supreme Court. Okay, so as we move on in this portion, Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, Zichrono Livracha, he was the chief rabbi in England, and he points out that human change is very slow. After God has told Moses he should climb up Mount Avarim, and the footnote actually changes it to Mount Nebo, to see the land that the children of Israel are about to inherit. After that, he will die, as did his brother Aaron before him. But Moses is concerned about continuity. A leader has to lead from the front, but they also need a leader to take them out. God tells him to appoint Joshua and have Eleazar ordain him and consult the Urim before God. Okay, any comments on the Urim? It's normally referred to both together, Urim and Tumim. Anybody have anything to say about that? We had talked about it in class. Merle, Lisa.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last two sentences? I couldn't hear.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who was the former head rabbi in the UK, suggests that change is very slow. And after God told Moses climb Mount Avarim, which it was actually Mount Nebo, we think, to have the children to see where the children of Israel are going, but he is not, that he will die like his brother Aaron did before him. So Moses is very concerned about continuity, because according to Rabbi Sacks, a leader not only has to lead from the front, but if he's taking people out of a land, he also has to be in the rear. A leader has to be with the people at all the times. So God tells him, appoint Joshua and have Eleazar ordain him and consult the Urim before God. So I wanted to know who can comment on what the Urim were.
Urim was,
Yes, Hannah.
Urim was kind of asking God for solution. If you don't, it was kind of representing God, but nobody knows the dimension. I mean, if it's something abstract or something, a real one, but it was a symbol of Urim, like in Egypt, they had it also in ancient Egypt. They have also the magician. So I don't know that it's not magician, but it's something kind of similar. But it was the terminology for asking question the representative of God.
Great
Something
answer.
like that.
Thank you, Hannah. Miriam.
I'm so glad you asked this question, Rabbi, because I'm not sure myself what they were, and yet I've come across this term all the time.
Urim and Tumim are mentioned several times.
Together, yes. I thought there was something substantial, something you can touch. Like
No.
stones on the breastplate of the priests were called the Urim and Tumim. They were very specific stones, and on the breastplate that the Kohanim wore, that the priests wore, those very beautiful, elaborate, size of a chest plate. There were 12 individual stones, like the lapis lazuli, an emerald, a so-and-so, and so-and-so, different stones representing the tribes of Israel. And to my knowledge, which can be absolutely incorrect, and I'm willing to, these were called the Urim
and Tumim.
It reminds me, sorry, about coming to the modern time, that Mrs. Reagan, she didn't ask about Urim and Tumim, she asked the star situation. She believed in the
consult the
astronomy.
stars. Okay,
Something like that.
Okay, well, we used to talk about it in class, about comparing it to a Ouija board, because it was something supernatural that if you move something around, you would get your answer, and it would go this way or that way. I can't tell you what's right and what's wrong. I wasn't there. I don't know. And there's very little that's definitive about it. Okay, so Moses passes the mantle on to Pincus by laying on of hands, compared to one candle. Susan?
Yes, would you keep your, I'm losing some,
Volume.
there you, the volume, is what happened with the Jonathan.
Yeah, it happens to me too.
Me too.
When you start, can you adjust your volume or stay in?
I'm up to the max.
There
Now
you
I
go.
hear you.
Now we can hear you.
Okay, I will try to talk. I will try to talk louder.
No,
All
I
right.
think when you move your head a certain way, it
Moving
doesn't
your
go.
head.
Okay. All right.
Yes, great, thank you.
That's okay. So we think about one candle lighting another, that the first candle is still lit, but brings brightness onto the second candle. And if you've ever been to a rabbinic ordination, has anyone here been to one? No. Okay, well, they're all, because of Zoom now, they're all recorded. You can go in and you can watch any of the rabbinical schools when they do the ordination. Hands are laid upon you when you become ordained. So that's what happened. And it was a very big challenge for Moses to have to depart and bestow the power to Joshua and not to enter the land after 40 years of wandering. But Moses didn't really fail. And I'm sure that all of you have heard this sentence from Pirkei Avot, which is, it's not your responsibility to complete a task, but neither are you free to desist from it. And that's what is happening. Rabbi Sachs says, success comes when others complete what we have started. So even if we can't do everything, and I wanted to mention this because umpteen times this week I have felt so overwhelmed reading the newspaper. watching television, just listening to what everything is going on with the climate change and the fires and the shootings. And it's just, sometimes it gets to be too much. And I think some of you know this, but I work as a grant chairperson for a charity that helps homeless women with children, either homeless or about to be homeless women with children. And when they recruited me, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago or so, I said, tell me more about this organization. And they said, we transform the lives of 6 families every 18 months. And the reason that they had that time period is they had a home where they would house them and educate them and teach them about budgeting and make them ready to go out and to get a job. And I thought, 6 families? Do I really want to spend a lot of time and effort? And especially since it wasn't close to me, it was in Glendale. And then I remembered, and I can't think of who said it. It might have been Rabbi Sachs, it might have been somebody else, that you can't fix everything. You can't do everything. But also, on the flip side of it, you can't do nothing. So even if you're only going to help 6 families, even if you're only going to do one thing, it's worth doing. And as a postscript to that, I wanted to say, because of finances, we lost the house. We've now gone to a different program that we give individual grants, and we help many more families a year. And even though it's small, it's not like an organization that helps hundreds or thousands every year. It's doing something. And that's what we all have to do, just something to make the world a little bit better. And that also will help us from not despairing when we hear of everything terrible that is going on in the world. And it's just sometimes gets to be too much.
I would like to say something. Okay.
Please.
Yeah. You talked about Moses, that he made this mission. God gave him this mission to bring Israel, to bring the children of Israel from the desert, from the slavery mentality to Israel, but he himself didn't have the chance to do it, right? So it reminds me of modern history about Herzl, who was the prophet of establishing an independence to the Jews, but he himself didn't accomplish it. But his idea was accomplished, and that was the establishment of the Israel country statement.
Right. It's not your task to complete the job, but neither are you free.
He could not complete, but he gave the idea and the inspiration to do it, and it was done.
Right.
More or less.
Okay. I want to ask, how many of you get the Jewish Journal? It's so hard to get these days.
It's very easy. You go to the library in Fairfax.
I'm sorry?
It's very easy. You go to the library, public library in Fairfax, next to the park.
Okay.
They have tons of it every week.
On Gardner Avenue, right off 3rd Street. That's the Fairfax one.
Well, there are some places you can still get it. The reason that I'm asking you this is there's a contemporary man who writes the most beautiful, meaningful, touching poems about every different Torah portion. And they've started publishing him in the Jewish Journal. His name is Rick Lupert. And the piece that he wrote on Pincus was just wonderful. I wanted to share with you, but not if everybody had already read it. And since I think I'm safe, I will go ahead and do that. It's always nice to see a project through to the end, especially when you've been working on it for 40 years. A lifetime, really, though back then people either lived much longer or they were prematurely smitten for lying with a Midianite. So when Moses, who's been working on this project of getting all the people into the promised land, who's been working on this project since back in the days when the Lord was just a glint of fire in a bush halfway up a mountain. So when Moses, who already knows he's not going to see this through to the end because of a brief transgression with a rock and a stick, so when Moses is asked to climb to the top of a mountain, Mount Abrim, if you really must know, the mount across the Jordan, when Moses is asked to stand on top of this mountain and view the promised land, the culmination of his life's work, a distant soil his shoes will never know, it must have been, well, you can imagine. You've probably been there. If you've ever experienced anything unrequited, you know exactly how Moses must have felt. Moses, the star of books 2 through 5, turned lame duck leader, asked to pass his spiritual power on to Joshua the rookie. The end is in sight, and it's not the land he sees from the top of the mountain. These old bones will rest in Moab. But don't let me skip ahead. We've still got a whole book to go, and it's the longest one. Heck, there are even still 2 chapters left in this one. You can't blame me. I get nostalgic about things that haven't happened yet. More often than not, the present moment escapes me as I worry about its passing. How many of us exist perpetually on our own Mount Ibrim, pining for the distant vista, completely missing the glorious view? This is the curse of the thoughtful human, the task-focused. We, temporary mammals, this earth not ours but meant for the next, and when it comes down to it, not them either. Unbreakable cycle. Know this, the promised land is where your feet are right now. Where this air enters your nose. Concentrate on that breath, and you will never be left alone on a mountain. I wish you all Shabbat Shalom. It was a pleasure being with you today. Be well, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
Michael.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you come more often.
And thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom.
Nice to see all
Shabbat
of you.
shalom.
Where is the coffee
What?
and the cake?
No coffee and cake. That's what we miss.
Absolutely. I'm surprised. I'm surprised Jews could even have a conversation without it.
Well, we didn't. When I taught Torah study, we always had coffee and cake.
Of course, it makes everything
We have
better.
the same Torah, right?
At least we will
You
have
need
a
it. You need
photo.
it to help you think. You can't do it. You know.
You do.
At least we can have a photo of a coffee and a good cake. Just look at it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Shabbat
Bye,
shalom.
everybody. Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Hello.
Bye.
Bye.
Rabbi, I learned a lot from you today.
Thank you. Thank you
That's
so
very
much.
meaningful to me. I try to learn every day of my life. Shabbat shalom.
It has
Shalom.
kept you
Shabbat
young,
shalom.
let me
Nice
tell
to
you
see you.
that.
Nice to meet you.
And Chana, so good to see you, and Susan.
Yeah, it was 2 years. It's about 2 years since we
It was
saw
over
each
2
other.
years. It was
Time
2
goes
years.
very fast, but very slow.
Right, right. But
It was nice to
luckily,
see you.
we're all here to talk about it.
Right. Okay. See you. Have a nice weekend, all of you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye.